Hi, and welcome to Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics, where meaning is always context-driven. I'm your host, John Straz, and welcome back to another session here in the book of Hebrews. And today we'll be looking at chapter 9, verses 15 to 22. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and open them up to that particular unit. And today, the moniker for my platform is where meaning is always context driven is going to be really true today. So we'll see how that plays out with the word covenant, Diαθηκη, in its two meanings. It's Septuagint translation of Diatheke and also Greco-Roman culture. So we'll look at that when we come to it. So we'll move on. Okay, as always, typically what we do is I open up with a certain scholar that kind of opens up our passage and kind of sets the table for us. And so today we have Harold Attridge. And so looking at verses 15 to 22, this is what he has to say. The next pericope is pivotal in the exposition of Jeremiah 31 and the play on the basic antitheses developed in the exposition of chapters 9 and 10. The preceding pericopes had contrasted the rituals of atonement of the earthly and heavenly tabernacles. Implicit in that contrast was also the opposition between the old and new cultic orders in verses 9 to 10. Now, the antitheses of the old and new is made explicit. At the same time, the author makes another significant move by clarifying the link between atoning sacrifice and the covenant. This move was necessary because the quotation from Jeremiah had said nothing either about how the new covenant was to be established or about the means by which the promised forgiveness of sins was to be effected. This paragraph, 15 to 22, will suggest that by the very act through which eternal redemption is achieved, the promised new covenant was established. Thus, Christ's sacrificial death takes on another dimension. Not only is it an atoning offering, it is also a covenant inaugurating event. And so I thought that was really cunning of Attridge here to bring in this last point here, which really takes up half of the content today. When we move to verses 18 to 21, or we can take it all the way to 22 if we want, but the main content would be between 18 and 21. Because it ends with a Jewish maxim, a neologistic maxim about the efficaciousness of sacrificial blood for the atonement for sins. Okay, so moving along. Okay, so we're coming here to our text, and we're going to look at some, and then we'll develop the structural analysis, as I always do, which is really structural analysis is just it's a glorified term for an outline. So it's a very, very detailed outline, and I should maybe take some time here to explain what the basis for making such detailed outlines, and that would be it stems ultimately from my Doctor Fater that I was once attached to, was Rolf Knierim at Claremont in Old Testament, and he developed this forms of the Old Testament literature, and I remember in class that he basically stated that the texts that we have from the Bible are considered to be inspired, and so if they are inspired, then there should be some rhyme and reason and logic to the text and how it's structured, and its coherence, and so that being the basis, he launched a whole series of for making structural analyses for the whole Old Testament, and those are still being written today. There's several volumes out, but anyhow, so that's where I learned this whole system of exegesis, and so what we do is we just go through the text and the text, and we look at conceptual analyses of the text, and then take note of each concept as he emerges from the text, and then we sit back and then we try to hierarchically itemize those underneath a macro structure and a micro structure, and situate them, all the thoughts, into their component parts. So that's basically what I'm doing here. And if this is new to you, it's an Old Testament exegetical tool, but it's being brought into the New Testament. You can see that David Ahn, in Word Biblical Commentary series for the Book of Revelation, he basically adopted Knierim's structural analysis and applied it to the Book of Revelation, and so you can apply this to any text, any document, as long as it's coherent. And certainly the Bible, with its inspiration, there should be some type of hierarchical structure undergirding it, since it's being inspired by God. God's just not speaking willy-nilly or inspiring madness, so to speak. Okay, so that's a little preface that I should make, especially for those who are new to to this channel. But anyhow, we'll begin as we always do. We'll read the text, and then we're going to then look at structure. And so we'll start here in 15. And for this reason, he is the mediator of a new covenant, in order that those who are called might receive the promise of an eternal inheritance, because a death happened for the redemption of transgressions under the first covenant. For where there is a will, there is a necessity for the death of the one who made the will to have occurred. For a will is valid on the basis of death, since it never has force when the one who made the will lives. Therefore, neither the first covenant was inaugurated apart from blood. For when each command was spoken by Moses in accordance with the law to all the people, taking the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop, he sprinkled the book itself and all the people, saying, "This is the blood of the covenant that God has commanded to you." And I guess here, and moreover, we'll put it that way, and moreover, the tent and all of the vessels of ministry he sprinkled with blood likewise. And almost all things are being cleansed by blood according to the law, and without the shedding of blood there is no forgiveness. Okay, that was a little shaky, but that's basically a decent translation off the bat. And so anyhow, what we're going to do here, let's sit back here and then let's look at structure. So we'll see that the passage begins with kai diatuta. All right. So kai is just, it's a conjunction, and it's just linking, one text to the next. But the diatuta here is definitely causal in nature by force of its prepositional its preposition dia. But I think here it's functioning inferentially, and so you could say, and therefore. We this kai diatuta. So it's functioning as an inferential grammatically, even though it's a preposition that would be adverbially modifying estin. But so we'll look at that a little later on. And so what happens here is that this verse 15 is he's summing up the ideas of what was going on, especially in verses 11 to 14. And that's concerning Christ's sacrificial blood and this heavenly sanctuary. And he's putting that together and stating that therefore he is a mediator of the new of the new covenant, the diathekes kines here. And so verse 15 basically is a thesis statement, all right? It makes a thesis statement that Christ qualifies as the mediator of the new covenant. So we have this inferential and causal basis, the diatuta here. Then the purpose of his mediatorial role, what's the purpose of it? It's that those who were called might receive an eternal inheritance. That's the purpose of the reason why Christ is the mediator of a new covenant. And that comes in here, right here at hapos. Okay, so this is going to be a subordinate purpose clause. And then we have this causal use of a infinitive absolute here, thanatou, again a menu here, and we'll look at that in the Grammatical Analysis. And then we have the basis of the purpose clause, that is this this genitive absolute here. The causal use, because a death has happened or a death has occurred, okay, for the redemption of transgressions at the time of the first covenant or under the first covenant, you would say. Okay. And then we have the purpose clause, the redemption of transgressions. That is, it's this death occurred. The purpose of the death occurring was for the redemption of transgressions. So we have that here. And then we have the temporal phrase being modified by the use of the preposition epi here with the dative at the time of or during the time of the first covenant. Okay. And then what's going on here, the next unit is going to be verses 16 and 17, okay? And this is where we have the use of the word diatheke. Now, to be quite honest with you, you do. It's very difficult for English, just if you don't know Greek, okay. And the problem with it is because diatheke in Koine Greek, especially for the Jewish readers of these, of the Hebrew Bible, in Greek, the LXX translates the ancient Near Eastern idea of berit as diatheke. All right. So the LXX has been translating, ever since the days of Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, about 250 BC, and out of Alexandria, when he commissioned the Jewish elders to undertake translating the Hebrew Bible into Greek. When they did so, when they came across berit, they translated it by diatheke, all right, because that would be the idea of a covenant, or and it could also be suntheke too. There's another, I think Aquila and Symmachus prefer that use instead of diatheke. But diatheke is what's being used in the New Testament and in the Septuagint, okay. But in the Greco-Roman society, a covenant, a diatheke, had the idea of a last will and testament. Okay, kind of like when your parents die, your father typically leaves a will to the children, so that is his will. Okay, so when you read verses 16 and 17, that idea of a last will and testament is what emerges from the text. So let's look at this. For where there is a will, there is a necessity for the death of the one who wrote the will to be, to have occurred or to be registered. Okay. However, we're going to, understand this this infinitive here, this passive infinitive, present tense, and then. And look at, and we'll go on in verse 17. For a will is valid upon death or deaths. Okay, so once you understand, once you read these verses, it's obvious what's going on here. And let's finish this because it never has force when the one who wrote the will lives. Okay, so that's not talking about an Old Testament covenant. That has nothing whatsoever to do with the idea of making covenants in the Old Testament. This has to do with a last will and testament of somebody writing out a will at their death who is going to inherit whatever he leaves or she leaves behind. Okay, but they have one word that covers both meanings. In English, we don't. Okay, we don't have one word that colors both ideas. Now, the idea of covenant is going to bleed through all of this. No matter how you read this, it's going to bleed through. Okay. And that is going to be the substrate that stays firm, okay? Because once you come here to 18, therefore neither was the first covenant inaugurated without blood, apart from blood, okay? So we know that he's using this what he's just doing, it's a double entendre, so to speak. He's playing off how the word has a denotation and a connotation. Okay, so he's playing off that, and these are Greco-Roman readers, and they all speak Greek, and this is their lingua franca, and so he's writing to them, and he's playing off of both meanings. Okay. And that's all that's really going on here. And so that's why, the moniker, meaning is always context driven. The context determines how you're going to translate a word here. And so, probably, and I'm going to say the most responsible translations into English are going to make this distinction here. They're going to say, testament or will. Okay. And so I think the more common vernacular for today is using the word will, as in someone's last will and testament. Okay, so that's why. But it's only one word here used throughout the whole the whole unit, the pericope that we're looking at here from 15 down to 22. Okay, so that just needs to be registered. But it's already felt, okay, right here in verse 15. Because once you come to verse 16, then you'll go, oh, okay, he's using the other sense, the normal Greco-Roman understanding of a last will and testament. He has that understanding here. But come back here up here to 15. Okay, now let's read through this again. And therefore, he is the mediator of the new covenant, in order that, so here's the purpose, in order that those who have been called might receive, what are they going to receive? The promise of an eternal inheritance. Boom, right there, inheritance. So what happens with the last will and testament? When you die, there are going to be those who are going to inherit what you have left behind. So he's playing off of Christ's death, on the cross, and then this is what validates those who have been called, into the new covenant by God to receive an eternal inheritance. It comes about through the death of Christ. Okay, because somebody, a last will and testament, somebody has to die in order for the children to inherit what was left by their parents. So that whole concept is being played here. He doesn't tell you what he's doing. You just have to you just pick up on it and you understand. Oh, okay, this is he's a nuanced writer, and it's a play on words here. But it's only one word to play with, and it just has two meanings, and so it's it's a Kristevan intertextual echo here that's being heard as a double entendre. Okay, so that's probably the best way to put this. The people that don't want to translate this by will, I don't know what they're hung up on, but you're certainly not going to really, but by translating will here, you understand how verses 16 and 17 operate. Okay, so that's why I would say the more responsible ones use this, and so it's just it just makes all the sense in the world. But you need to know that even though it's being used, you do need to understand that we want to keep the idea of covenant it's being played on. It's being played on here, okay? And it may even be being played on here when we look at necrois, okay, upon deaths. So he could be playing this out here to letting you know that he wants to stick with the idea of covenant, okay, and talking and that this is going to refer to it's going to have it's going to be double voiced. It's going to want to pick up on the dead animals that were slayed for the inauguration of the covenant under Moses, okay, but also at the same time referring to the death of somebody or of multiple people for an inheritance that is to be, entered upon their deaths, okay, and where the inheritance of the parents become effective at their death. Okay, all right. So that's probably being played on here, and it's good to note the back and forth. How he's really he's letting this word rub against itself here. So that needs to be understood here in order for us to understand the flow of the text and the elasticity of the meaning of words. Okay, and so Diatheke definitely has these two different meanings, and for our context, the denotation is going to be covenant, and then the connotative use is going to be will, but the will surfaces here in 16 and 17. Okay, so as long as you understand that, and it really becomes clear, and it says, since it never has strength when the one who writes the will is alive. So that has nothing whatsoever to do with the covenant. Okay, so and then notice here that this isn't diathemenoi, okay, it's diathemenos. So it goes back to the singular here versus the plural here, okay. So of necrois. So that's he's toying here with this. So you have to, scholars have to recognize this. If they don't and they just want to keep it all covenant, I'm sorry, they're just not dealing with how they're not dealing with the true meaning of the word, okay, and it's very, very nuanced here, okay. All right, so we'll move on. So once we come here to verse 18, then we're going to have a new section here, okay, and so so basically what I've done here on the macro structure level. Okay, so we had our thesis statement here, okay, Christ is the mediator of the new covenant, boom, okay. And then we had the inferential causal basis, the purpose, and then the basis of the purpose, and all this here. So all of this is encompassed what's going on in verse 15, okay. B is what's going on in verses 16 and 17. So it's the basis for the thesis, because it starts off with gar here. Hapugar, diatheke, for where there is a will, okay. So Christ's last will and testament, the use of diatheke as a double entendre, okay. So I entitled here verses 16 and 17, okay. But once you come to 18 to 21, here on point C, now we have the parallel inference drawn from both thesis and basis statements over the inauguration of the Old Covenant. Okay, so let me explain this. Parallel inference. So let's look here at verse 18. Therefore, ude, neither. Okay, so this is very important. udet is the operative word here. Okay, therefore neither was the first covenant inaugurated without blood. Okay, or apart from blood. Okay, so neither is going to then draw a contrast or a parallel. It's comparing it to something else. So what it's doing is he's saying that the new covenant also was inaugurated by the use of blood. Okay, so both covenants were inaugurated by means of blood. Okay, sacrificial blood. Okay, so that is so this uda. So this is why we put parallel inference drawn. Okay, so the inference is therefore, is hothen. Okay, therefore. All right. So what he's doing, he's summing up what he just said in 16 and 17 together with what he said here in verse 15, that Christ is the mediator of a new covenant. Okay. So he's going to contrast that to the old covenant. All right. And then that's what he says here. Therefore, neither was the first covenant, and so here we have he prote here. The word diatheke is not here. You have to supply it. So it's done so that any intelligible person is going to. He already knows. He doesn't need to stick it in. He wants you to fill it in. Okay. So there's just like a blank here, okay, and you have to, and you're reading it, and they go, oh, okay, well, yeah, he's talking about the diatheke here, okay. So you just supply that. So in English, they should be the word covenant should be italicized here, okay. So this author does this all the time in chapter 8 and it started off this way in chapter 9, verse 1. Okay, so he's saying this, and so we so we put in covenant here. Okay, so and then once we come here to 19 to 21, we have the scriptural basis statement. Okay, for this parallel inference drawn by the use of blood at the inauguration of the covenants. Okay, so he has here for every command. All right, whenever commandment was spoken by Moses in accordance with the law to the people, right? Taking blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop, he sprinkled the book itself and all the people, saying, and then he goes into quoting, "This is the blood of the covenant which God commanded you." And then there's this additional later item here. And moreover, the tent and all of the vessels of ministry he sprinkled likewise with blood. Okay, so I mean that didn't happen until Exodus 40 here on New Year's Day when he erected the tent. All right, and this happened here. On the day of Pentecost here, so we have this 50 days after Passover. That's when they came to Mount Sinai, and then the 10 Commandments were given, and that's when he made this covenant here. On maybe that day or the day after, whatever, but it was all done there at that time, and then what we have here in verse 22 is a concluding neologistic Jewish maxim concerning blood and forgiveness of sins. Now this is very loaded, but it is a concluding statement, okay? And almost all things are being cleansed by blood, according to the law, and without the shedding of blood there is no forgiveness. So this is this. So what I'm saying here, neologistic, is that the author has created this particular word here. It's never he created this de novo, so it's a neologistic term that he created, and the shedding of blood, and so this is a kind of like a proverbial statement or a maxim, a short proverb. And it concerns blood and forgiveness, okay? And it's Jewish, okay? So that's why we're going to end this here. In kind of keeping 22 separate, but summing up as a kind of just like a universal theologizing statement to conclude one section from the next. So this is kind of how I followed this, the structure here. But it's very good to keep 18 to 21 as a unit. 16 to 17 is going to be a unit because it's underneath the auspices of the double entendre being played here on the word diatheke. And then verse 15 is going to offer the thesis statement that Christ is the mediator of a new covenant, based upon what was going on, in pretty much in 11 to 14. Okay, and so that's how the unit breaks down, and then there's we have all these other little points here that we want to take note here. When we have a unit like 16 to 17, then you need to then say, okay, well then what ideas can we flesh out of 16 to 17? What conceptual units of thought emerge? So we have the existence of a will, for where there is a will. Okay, that's boom. Okay, there's the necessity of the testator's death, the one who wrote the will. Okay, the basis of those assertions are, and it states it right here, gar, for, right here. Okay, gar, for a will is valid on the basis of death. Okay, or yeah. So that this is so all these things they nicely they all nicely break down into individual thoughts, and it's very important here for you to be able to recognize this. Okay, and it keeps we're taking into account every unit of thought, and we're just itemizing it. So take this and expand it, use it for however you want to, but it's very, very helpful in just identifying how the text flows, and how its thoughts emerge, from the text. Okay, so let's move on. So this here is the text taken from Exodus that supplies the basis for what we saw in 18 to 21. And it probably would be good here to look at this. And to Moses he said, go up to Yahweh, you and Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship from afar. And Moses shall draw near alone to Yahweh, and they shall not come to near, and the people will not go up with him. And Moses went up and he reported to the people all of the words of Yahweh and all of the judgments, and all of the people heard, excuse me, and all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which Yahweh has spoken, na'aseh, we will do. By Yiktov Moshe, and Moses wrote all of the words of Yahweh, and rose up early in the morning, and he built a Mizbeach, an altar, underneath the mountain, and 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent forth the youths of the sons of Israel, and they offered up burnt offerings, and they sacrificed peace offerings to Yahweh of bulls. Okay, and Moses took half of the blood and put it in bowls, and half of the blood he sprinkled upon the altar, and he took the book of the covenant, and he read in the ears of the people, and they said, Kol asher deber Adonai na'aseh v'nishma. Okay, and all of the words which Yahweh has spoken, we will do and listen or do and obey. It's the Asah Shema here. Okay, and Moses took the blood and sprinkled upon the people, and said, behold, the blood of the covenant which Yahweh has cut with you, concerning all of these words. And Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up, and they saw the God of Israel, and underneath his feet was as the work of a pavement of sapphire, and as the gleam of heaven itself for brightness. Okay, so I don't want to get into all of this last statement here about the basically about the firmament and all that, but we don't need to delve into that. But this here is what Moses is, our author of the book of Hebrews is drawing upon. But you'll notice that he takes great license in how he describes all this, because remember, this here doesn't say that he sprinkled blood upon the book. Okay, which our author definitely says he sprinkled the book itself and all the people. So this text here basically just says he sprinkled the blood upon the people, and at the altar he poured it out. Okay, and then he takes a little more license and says that it was with bulls. Or I should say bullocks, okay, and he also says goats, and then he includes, basically what he includes hyssop and scarlet wool, all right, and so this is all just kind of added in. Now, there may have been other texts that we're not aware of that expanded upon this particular narrative here that we're not aware of, that we're not privy to, but our author kind of colors all this in, and he also includes then the erection of the altar on New Year's Day in Exodus 40, and includes that that he also sprinkled the tabernacle and all the appurtenances, all the items of the tabernacle he sprinkled with blood, and all that's mentioned in Exodus 40. Okay, and that's remember that there Exodus 40 is at the New Year's Day, and this here, all of this here taking place in Exodus 24 is taking somewhere around the 50th day to and some other days past that, but it's during this whole celebration of what we would later refer to as Pentecost. Okay, this the giving of the law, or and the giving of the Spirit in the New Testament. That's all being played off here on Pentecost. Okay, so we needed to look at this text and we needed to see that our author is using a little liberality in expanding this, but he was inspired to do so. So it wouldn't surprise me that there were other texts that our author was led to write this. So I just don't think it's that the author's just getting flowery just to be flowery. Okay, because we do want to ascribe inspiration to this. So we have to look at this as that there's more than going on than what we're privy to. Okay, it's beyond our pay grade at this point. So we don't have answers for everything. We can just take note of what's going on and what we do know versus what we don't know. And don't let it bug you. Remember our author did this with the altar of incense altar. He put it inside the Holy of Holies versus inside the holy place. So he had his reasons for doing so. He didn't explain himself other than basically maybe asserting that he wanted to emphasize its use on the day of Yom Kippur, okay, where it was essentially used in regards to the Holy of Holies. So that's these are things you guys. The New Testament and the Old Testament, they're full of these types of lacunas of thoughts and explanations, and so I wouldn't get bent out of shape. Just understand what's going on, and then just keep an open mind, and we'll plug along. No biggie. A lot of questions we get to ask when we get to heaven. Okay, and I wanted to look at Thompson here, and just look how he was going to talk to us about the term diatheke as it's used in our text. The legal analogy is useful for the author because he wishes to insist that Jesus' death was the necessary basis for his becoming mediator of the new covenant. What the author suggests as a valid principle does not, however, hold true for covenants in the Bible. For death is not necessary for a covenant to be in force. Consequently, most translations render diatheke as testament or will, the common meaning in secular Greek. Okay? However, this general principle does not precisely fit Hellenistic law either, for in numerous instances the heirs received the bequest before the death of the testator. Just like it can happen today. Thus, the general principle of 9:16-17 is based on the legal practice, but has many exceptions. The author's oscillation between the two meanings of diatheke is not unusual for someone who lives between the Jewish and Greek cultures. Okay? For it allows him to make an important play on words, adhering precisely to neither Jewish nor Greek law, but reflecting the influence of both. Boom! Nicely said, Thompson. You get an A, and you pass go, and you get to collect 200. Okay, so coming here then to the text, I did want to include this particular reference here in regards to diatuta. So signpost connectives are connective words including particles, conjunctions, and prepositional phrases like ara, gar, diatuta, un, and etc. We put hothen in there. They're so named because, like signposts, they stand at major intersections within the overall argument, at the seams between paragraph sections or other thought units, and connect them like literary street signs. Okay, so we find this here on pages 167 to 168, and that's the reason why I put diatuta here up on the signpost, rather, because typically it's going to it's going to come down here, and we're going to put in then dia, and then tuta here, okay, because the preposition here is going to then be modifying here adverbially the verb est, okay, but it functions here as therefore here, and you'll see most of your texts state that. So it's functioning as an inferential on a signpost, okay. And then we have here mesites here, and its functioning here is the predicate nominative, and kai here is going to be it's just a conjunction here linking the text together, and therefore he is the mediator of a new covenant. Okay, and then we have this hopos here, okay, and so we needed to fit it on the page, so we take this diagonal line here, and then we go dot 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 to push it over to the left. So now we have this, this is our subordinate purpose clause, in order that those who have been called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. Okay, and then we have this causal use of the genitive absolute, because a death occurred, or a death happened for the purpose of redemption of transgressions at the time of the first covenant, or under the first covenant. However, we're going to look at this, but it's a temporal use here of epi. Anyhow, so this is how this text here is structured. This is your base text. We put in he here, which is Christ, and implied from the verb, and the predicate nominative here, and it's modified by new covenant. So anyhow, so this is how we understand this. I don't know. But I guess one thing here, we need to look at a death occurred what? For what purpose? For redemption. Okay, and redemption from what? From transgressions. Okay, transgressions means that there are boundaries. Okay, and it's kind of like, there's boundaries set up. Don't go beyond this boundary. All right, and if you do, you have sinned. You have transgressed. You have passed over the line. That's what transgression means, to go beyond the stated boundaries. So playing outside of the box, outside of the rules, outside of the fence, okay, these are transgressions, okay? So this is the reason for Christ's, this is, it's the basis clause for, why, we're receiving some type of inheritance. All right, and this is telling us why, because the Christ died for the redemption. He bought us back from the slavery to our sins. Okay, and he's basically doing this at the time of of those underneath the first covenant, because that's when Christ died, was during that time. Okay, and so he's the one who divides the times, and between the old and new, and it's all based upon his death and the timing of it. Okay, so that's the flow of the author here. But the word inheritance here is going, when do you get your inheritance? Well, when your parents die, okay? So this is how he's already coloring the use of diatheke here. He's already knowing that he's going to be using it as Christ's last will and testament. And so we're going to cash in on this inheritance. And the idea of this would be Nahalat Olam, and this would refer to, remember the eternal inheritance as it's stated in the Old Testament. It's referring to the land of Canaan. And remember, this is, he's writing, this is the first century. These Jews were expecting the Messiah, and they were expecting that they were going to inherit the land. That means, that the land of Canaan, and so this still is still going to, for us who are millennialists. I'm definitely not a non-millennialist. You can't, it's impossible to just spiritualize all of the texts of all the prophets dealing with Old Testament eschatology. It's just to write it all off, it's spiritualize it. It's crazy. Okay, and it's definitely not. Why did the Jews reject Jesus? They were expecting a political Messiah. Okay, that's what they were expecting. So if that's what they're expecting, they're going to get it. Okay, they're going to get it at Christ's second coming. And we'll see this down here. I think in verse 28 of our chapter, Christ is going to return a second time for salvation. He ain't going anywhere. He's staying here. You're going to have their eternal inheritance. You're going to enjoy the land of Canaan, just like the prophets told you. The meek will inherit the earth, the land. Okay, so this is what's going to happen, as well as the whole, when God creates a new heavens and a new earth and all that. So it goes on. It will be for eternity. But this whole idea here of the Old Testament here, eschatology, is still this isn't devoid of understanding the land. You may have tried to co-opt this in your Christianity. It's funny how I say that, because you have no clue. This text was written by a Jew for Jews. They were looking forward to kicking out the Romans and having Messiah rule over the land. Okay, and that's going to happen. Okay. We'll find out when Christ comes back. Okay, he's coming back here for a purpose. He ain't, he coming down here to stay. He ain't coming here he's going to be here for 1,000 years. So, all right, just pushing a little theology there on you, and which is good. You need to know where I'm coming from in my own eschatology. Okay, so let's look here. Another statement for Attridge, kind of going over what Thompson said. The argument for the thesis of verse 15, that any covenant requires a death, develops in two stages. The first is more abstract and analytical. The second, more exegetical. Okay. The first phase of the argument, although using technical legal language and presented in a strict deductive format, is in fact quite playful, involving exploitation of the ambiguity of the term diatheke, the innumerable attempts that have been made to find a single overarching concept of diatheke that can encompass the formulations of this entire section, all ignore Hebrews' obvious rhetorical conceit. I like that. The argument is simply that any diatheke covenant requires a death because no will or testament is valid until the testator dies. So this is this is just some good words here coming from Attridge. And so there's definitely ambiguity going on here. And we'll see this here with Kristeva here in our next slide. Now, I don't know if you ever heard of Julia Kristeva. We mentioned her back in chapter 2. And she has to say this. With Bakhtin, moreover, these two axes, which he respectively calls dialogue and ambivalence, are not clearly distinguished. But this lack of rigor is rather a discovery that Bakhtin is the first to introduce into literary theory. Every text is constructed as a mosaic of citations, every text is an absorption and transformation of another text. In the place of the notion of intersubjectivity, that of intertextuality is situated, and poetic language can be read at least as double. It's like a double entendre. Okay, so there's a play on words, there's a play on nuances, and texts are being absorbed and transformed, and this is how every text is constructed. And this is, I did my whole dissertation upon this topic. So this is it's a critical literary critic, definitely not a Christian, but she has contributed to the understanding of how texts are used in the world, and they can apply to the Bible as well. And so you'll see a lot of scholars referring to Julia Kristeva, and so I do as well. And we also have Bakhtin here. He's the king, and she's basically letting you know that her stuff is coming from him, and I don't know. This guy is this whole quote here. I'm not going to go through it, but this is gold. Okay, this is gold. And I quoted this whole portion here at the end of my thesis was published by Brill, and so at the end of everything, this is towards the end of the book. I quoted this, and it's very powerful. And so we should look at this. We'll read some of this. The speech act, by its nature, is social. The word is not a tangible object, but always shifting, always changing means of social communication. It never rests with one consciousness, one voice. Its dynamism consists of movement from speaker to speaker, from one context to another, from one social community to another, from one generation to another. Through it all, the word does not forget its path of transfer and cannot completely free itself from the power of those concrete contexts into which it had entered. By no means does each member of the community apprehend the word as a neutral element of the language system, free from intentions and untenanted by the voices of its previous users. Instead, he receives the word from another voice, a word full of that other voice. The word enters his context from another context and is permeated with the intentions of other speakers. His own intention finds the word already occupied, thus the orientation of the word among words, the various perceptions of other speech acts, and the various means of reacting to them are perhaps the most crucial problems in the sociology of language usage. Each social group in each historical period has its own individual perception of the word, its own range of verbal possibilities. By no means can the ultimate conceptual authority of the artist always be expressed in direct, unrefracted, non-conventionalized auctorial speech in every social situation. If a given social group has at its disposal an authoritative and durable medium of refraction, then conventionalized discourse and one another of its varieties will hold sway. Cultured speech is speech refracted through the authoritative canonical medium. Boom. I could read this all day, every day. Bakhtin, you got to remember, this guy was a Christian in the Soviet Empire, and was, for his Christianity, was thrown, up in Siberia. He was sentenced to 10 years. I don't think he served all that, but So this is all really double speak about the Bible. Okay, so he's talking that, you know, that even the Bible can, you know, it's its own authoritative canonical medium. Its speech is refracted through the authoritative canonical medium. So he's talking about how in Middle Ages the Bible was basically an authoritative medium of refraction, and everybody borrowed, you know, phraseologies out of the Bible, and they adapted it and recontextualized it, distilled it, and applied it, resignified it for, you know, for their own purposes in writing whatever document they were writing. Okay, and so all this, Mikhail Bakhtin is basically the scholar that brought all this about. Kristeva picked up on it, and the rest is history. So I just wanted to let you know, and you may hear his name, you know, in the future. Okay, so moving along here, I don't really. We've already worked through the text here, but, you know, I have here all of the you know, these grammatical analyses here for the texts for this particular unit here, and so we'll bypass those. So you guys, I do thank you for, you know, being devoted to this particular channel, and if you have any questions, you can email me directly here, and please like, subscribe, and share, and I really thank you guys for I got several new subscribers here. I'm just starting out, so it's very, very small, but thank you for those who have subscribed here recently. It does mean a lot, and please do like, share, and subscribe, and hopefully this has been a blessing to you, and we will wrap up chapter 9 next time.